Yellowstone National Park is world famous for its incredible wildlife, including more than half of the world's population of gray wolves. But despite their fame, wolves are rarely seen by park visitors. However, there's one place in Yellowstone where wolves and people regularly cross paths, the small town of Gardiner, Montana. And if you know where to look, you can spot wolves there every single winter. Hi, and welcome to Yellowstone's Shifting Sands, where we explore how animal migration is changing in a changing Yellowstone. This is the story of the gray wolf and how it shaped the lives of those living in the shadow of America's first national park. Gray wolves have been an iconic species at Yellowstone since the park was first established in 1872. But throughout the 20th century, wolves were persecuted across the United States and eventually disappeared from Yellowstone altogether by the 1930s. It wasn't until 1995 that gray wolves were reintroduced to the park. Since then, the wolf population has grown to over 100 animals, and they can once again be found across most of their historic range in Yellowstone. Even though Yellowstone has plenty of wild prey for wolves to hunt, occasionally these predators must leave the park in search of food. The most well-known of these excursions happens every summer when wolves travel into the nearby Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness to hunt for elk. These dispersing wolves typically consist of young adults who haven't yet found their own territory or breeding partners within the park. Every summer, tens of elk and a handful of wolves make the journey north out of Yellowstone. But while these dispersers sometimes stay out of the park for months at a time, they eventually return to Yellowstone's protected wilderness, which provides the security they need to successfully breed. In fact, some of the wolves that leave Yellowstone end up being some of the park's most successful breeders, producing dozens of pups over their lifetimes. Wolves that disperse outside of Yellowstone often come back to the park with new knowledge about hunting and the ability to find mates. Dispersal is also important for maintaining genetic diversity in the park's wolf population. While gene flow between populations is important, it's also risky because it leaves wolves vulnerable to vehicles, livestock, and other human-related dangers. Even today, wolves that travel through human-dominated areas like the Gardiner, Montana corridor face these risks. The small town of Gardiner sits just north of Yellowstone's northern boundary near the confluence of the Yellowstone and Teton rivers. Because of its proximity to the park, Gardiner is frequently visited by bison, elk, black bears, and even grizzly bears. But none of these animals stick around town for very long. They usually just pass through on their way to and from their favorite Yellowstone habitats. But wolves, on the other hand, sometimes stick around. In the winter, elk herds congregate in the Gardiner Basin, an area just north of town surrounded by private land and the Yellowstone River. When the elk herd congregates here, so do the wolves. From December through February, hungry wolves prowl the snow-covered fields just north of town, searching for elk carcasses left over from previous kills. Sometimes these wolves head even further south, entering Gardiner in search of any carrion they can find. While it might seem like these wolves are simply following the elk herd, that's not entirely true. In fact, wolves traveling through this region during the winter are almost always looking for a meal, and they're willing to scavenge in order to get one. Gray wolves are classified as apex predators, meaning that they sit at the top of the food chain in their ecosystem. Most of the time, Yellowstone wolves hunt other animals for their food, but they are known to scavenge when opportunities arise. In fact, studies have shown that scavenging can account for more than 20% of a wolf's diet in some cases. So while wolves will happily scavenge roadkill, they prefer to take down live prey. But all of this searching requires a lot of energy, and in the wintertime Yellowstone can be a very cold place. That's why sometimes wolves don't feel like hunting. Instead, they'd rather try to steal a meal from another predator, and that's where the people of Gardiner come in. Most nights the full moon rises before sunset and sets after sunrise, giving people just a few hours of darkness to complete their daily routines. It's during this sliver of nighttime that the wolves prowl. Although dark, these hours are still light enough for people to be outside working, walking their dogs, or heading home from a night out in town, and while they might not see them, there's a good chance they're being watched by a wolf. Occasionally, these hungry wolves will enter people's yards in search of any scraps they can find, and if they can't find anything to eat, they may try to steal a pet dog or a house cat. Some of these attempts are more bold than others. Some wolves simply stand outside a home's back door waiting for someone to open it. Others aren't quite so patient. In January 2016, a Gardiner resident reported a strange scene in her backyard. A wolf had entered her yard and pushed her 2 alpacas over a fence in an attempt to get them out of their pen. Luckily for the alpacas, the wolf didn't want to hunt. It simply wanted to steal one of the smaller alpaca cryas for an easy meal. In the end, the wolf was scared off by the owner, but not before causing hundreds of dollars in property damage. Luckily for the residents of Gardiner, most wolves are timid around humans and would rather try to steal a meal than risk being shot by a person they know is there. For this reason, the Department of Livestock has strict guidelines about what people can do to protect their animals from wolves. Among these guidelines are rules about fencing, lighting, and noise, all designed to prevent wolves from seeing a property as an easy source of food. All of these measures seem to work, as there have only been a handful of livestock losses attributed to wolves in recent years. While residents of Gardiner might not appreciate wolves trying to steal their alpacas, they generally enjoy having wolves in the neighborhood. Every year, dozens of tourists visit the town specifically to catch a glimpse of wolves searching for a meal in the moonlight. But you don't have to go to Gardiner to see wolves in Yellowstone. Throughout the winter, wolf sightings increase in the park as people begin to explore the snowy landscapes. Wolves are crepuscular, meaning they're most active at dawn and dusk, so it's usually easiest to spot them during these hours. Wolf sightings tend to be highest in the Lamar Valley, which funnels both wildlife and visitors between Yellowstone's northern and central ranges. While most of Yellowstone's wolves prefer to avoid people, there are a few individuals who don't mind humans being around. One such wolf is a large gray male known as 824, or Brutus. Over the past few winters, Brutus has become famous among park visitors for allowing people to approach him within just a few feet. On some occasions, he even allows people to pet him. But despite his friendly demeanor, Brutus is still a wild animal and should never be approached. In fact, it's illegal to intentionally feed or attempt to feed any wild animal in Yellowstone National Park. But even if you follow these guidelines, you might still have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see one of the most elusive animals in North America. Seeing wolves in the wild is an unforgettable experience, but it's one that should be done safely and responsibly. For the safety of both visitors and animals, the National Park Service asks that anyone planning to view wolves in the park attend a free program led by a park ranger. Rangers can teach visitors how to identify wolves from a distance, which is key to protecting both visitors and the animals themselves. The NPS also encourages people to use their senses to look, listen, smell, and even touch the environment around them, as this is the best way to connect with a park's resources. Whether you see wolves in Yellowstone or not, a trip to the park will undoubtedly leave you with a newfound appreciation for the world's most famous gray wolves. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.